Today's webinar, Detecting Insider Threats with Multi-layered Mainframe Security, is co-hosted by Compuware and RSM Partners. Our featured speakers today are John Crossno and Mark Wilson. John is the Principal Product Manager for Compuware Application Audit. In addition to his history of a pragmatic approach to product management in various mainframe software and storage environments, he has an extensive background in development and field technical services. Mark is the Technical Director for RSM Partners. Leading the world's largest mainframe infrastructure team, Mark draws on more than 30 years' experience in diverse environments. Widely regarded for his mainframe security specialism, Mark also leads the RSM security practice and is highly regarded as a conference speaker. Today you'll get an exclusive assessment of the current state of enterprise security and learn how to fill mainframe security gaps to reach compliance and avoid penalties. With our introductions complete, John, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
So development practices have matured over the past decade or so to be very aggressive, fast-paced, and built on Agile and DevOps methodologies. These changes provide the collaborative environment needed to produce quality output that delivers great customer experiences. However, mainframe development processes and tools haven't evolved similarly and are preventing IT from integrating their mainframe into these broader DevOps efforts. With exponentially increasing demands on your back-end systems from mobile, cloud, and web apps, along with a high number of mainframe experts retiring, this is a problem that must be addressed. Compuware can help by enabling a blended ecosystem where both mainframe and non-mainframe developers can use the same agile processes. Our products and integrations with popular mainstream products like SonarSource and Jenkins provide a naturally agile approach to app dev. We are changing the way developers develop by helping experienced staff and new hires perform mainframe-related tasks with agility, efficiency, and precision. Carrying that mainstreaming the mainframe strategy forward also extends into security, where it's crucial that the mainframe be able to participate in a level of cybersecurity monitoring and protection as other platforms. Application Audit does this by bringing the data it collects to the edge of the mainframe, partnering with other experts in the security and analytics space to provide a complete end-to-end security solution.
Thanks, John. So Mark Wilson here. So just a little bit about RSM. So obviously with all of those rapidly developing and rapidly changing applications, we need a robust, performant and secure mainframe environment to host those applications. So this is where RSM steps forward as all things mainframe infrastructure. John, if you'd advance the slide. So if you look at the slide here, this really talks about the values of RSM, and everything we do is really about the RSM people, the RSM team. We're just short of 100 mainframe technicians now, covering everything from ZOS, CICS, IMS DB2. One of our specialist areas and one of the areas we spend a lot of our time is in and around security. So we talk about assured service, we talk about assured skills, but we also talk about assured security. So next slide please, John. So we're fairly unique in the market because all we do is mainframes. We've got, as I said, just short of 100 technicians. The majority of them have 25 years or more experience. But we've also developed a mainframer in training program, MIT. And what that means is we've now got 12 technicians in the organisation under the age of 25 learning mainframes. So it's quite an interesting office to be in at the moment, watching all those sage-like experienced mainframe consultants teaching all the young upstarts, JCL and Rex and C-List and Assembler, and obviously all the security products, RACF, ACF2 and Top Secret. We got into the software business by request of one of our clients. wasn't something we anticipated we would ever do, but one of our clients asked us to go out to the market, research what was out there. We came back and said, there isn't anything out there that does what you want. And the client said, well, why don't you write it? So we did. So if we go on to the next slide, then we'll see two of the products we've developed here, front and centre. We've got the one at the top of the screen there in the middle, Z Detect, and then the one at the bottom we've got Break Glass. And at a high level, Z Detect is really about security analytics, but on the platform itself. So one of the slides we'll show later shows you some of the infrastructure of Detect. And what we talk about is the knowledge base. And what we've done is we've distilled all this mainframe security knowledge and mainframe knowledge into a product. So when we see a user and we're monitoring all the different activity on the mainframe, whether that's monitoring the syslog, monitoring SMF events, when we determine that there's potential suspicious activity going on, we have the ability, if you have Compuware application audit installed, to actually call application audit and ask application audit to record every keystroke of that user we believe may be behaving suspiciously. And then you roll that down then to the, not quite so fast, John, so you roll that down to the privileged user. We know the privileged users in our environments are a problem. So what we're actually saying is, if you have got a privileged user and you provision that access via Break Glass, as that user logs on, we again will record every keystroke of that privileged user. And that's what we're talking about, multi-layered security. We know we have privileged users. We're almost certain we'll have suspicious insider activity. And what we're aiming to do here is detect it and record it as we go through. So, John? So, yeah, today we are still seeing the hot topics being security, cyber security. It's a huge area of interest for people, but very few folks understand the real mainframe. Few end users are sufficiently invested. What makes RSM different is this is all we specialise in, just mainframes. And what we see out there in the market is clients telling us they've got problems with security, they've got problems with skills, and they need to be able to reduce their costs. And what we're trying to do by way of our MIT program and our software products and the services we offer is trying to address all of those three major areas. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Mark. So as we look over to application audit, we're really looking at the industry from the industry issues from two different perspectives. We're all familiar with the growing cybersecurity risks. Breaches are increasing, and in fact, in 2016, there were 4 billion records stolen, which was more than double the numbers combined from 2014 and 2015. And in those 2 years, it was already a 5% increase. The time it's taking organizations to find breaches is much too long. The global average today is 146 days, which indicates that some countries are better than others. EMEA, for example, the average was 469 days to detect a breach. The other side of the industry deals with data privacy and the need to comply with industry mandates. There's GDPR, which is affecting people on a more global scale than they might think. Right? There's in the States we have PCI and HIPAA, and it all comes down to knowing which data was taken so that you can properly inform the regulatory authorities and the owners of that data when there was a breach and which data was taken. Right? And you need mechanisms to be able to control and monitor that access so that you can report down to the granular level, specifically which data was actually taken. It's not about the 50 million records you have in your DB2 database. It's about the 10,000 that were actually taken. And you need to automatically notify when these breaches occur. Right? GDPR says you have 72 hours after you've detected the breach to notify the owners of that data, that their data was taken. Right? So those become really important things to be able to monitor and control and notify for. So the problem really is that, while 70 to 80% of our data sits on the mainframe, the mission critical data or business critical systems and data, right? And the mainframe is inherently highly secure, or as Mark Wilson would say, is the most securable platform. Security teams really still lack visibility into application user behavior, right? How are users actually using the applications? Are they using them the way they were intended to be used? Right? And this is for users that normally have access, your normal employees, for example. And then you have users with unauthorized access. These are users that have come in and fraudulently acquired credentials. So while the credentials they're using have access, they themselves really do not or should not. And to get the information for this requires that auditors and risk management people really have to go to the systems programmers and other such people to get logs and get SMF records and get information pertinent to detecting those breaches. But when you have insiders working against you, right, because sometimes it's the insider that's causing the breach, they can get these logs for you, for the auditors, and they can doctor those logs to hide their tracks before they provide them. So they really need a way of getting this information and monitoring user activity without relying on the same insiders that might actually be committing the crimes. So currently, auditors have to rely on SMF data. They're scanning various log files that are available. They might be pushing that information down into a theme or some other analytics engine so that they're not having to go through all this information manually, of course, that they're automating that through analytics. Everybody is relying on the power of RACF and ACF2 and Top Secret, which are the security packages for the mainframe. And some may be using active monitoring solutions such as Break Glass or Detect from RSM.
So if you see what the problem is here, from a sort of application security perspective, one of the things we're seeing out in the market is this increased awareness of mainframes and the value to the hacker community. We're seeing literally new tools appearing on GitHub and other platforms all of the time. How do you enumerate all of the users on a system, whether that be a TSO or a Kix-based application? There are tools out there to help you do that. I haven't seen these tools, but there is rumour that the hacker community have already devised a mechanism for brute forcing RACF database passwords even when they're encrypted with AES 256 with the latest technology. Now, it would take a long time to do, but they've already done the work. So we really need to up our game. And what we're seeing in the market and some of the stuff we're seeing out there from recent tests and audits is we still see serious configuration and control issues. We had the team out there pen testing a particular client in Europe, and we managed to breach the system in 45 minutes, literally from nowhere to having your own APF authorized library, complete control of the system in 45 minutes. We did what we thought was going to be a relatively small audit, and we ended up with over 80 severity 1 issues. Things like APF authorised libraries with UAC of update or ID asterisk update, or an ACF2 rule that defaulted to update for a linked list dataset. These are all the things that we are seeing all of the time. And what we're saying here is that we need to get more proactive. We need to start understanding, what some of these users, whether they be a privileged user who we've given some extra privilege to install a change or remediate an issue, or somebody who's actually got access to the system and is using it in a way that it's not supposed to be used, because the saying, well, they shouldn't be doing that, really doesn't cut it if they're, as John says, they've taken 10,000 records out of your DB2 database. Over to you, John. So the specific issues we're seeing here, what we're trying to say here is, we are trying to come up with a combination of tooling and providing a solution that helps us tackle this insider threat problem and helps us monitor and manage our privileged users. So this is where it's this combination of the Compuware and RSM tools. The aim is to try and help to solve these issues in an automated way, so you have something watching your mainframe 24/7, 365 days a year. And that's what we're trying to do here. So just a little bit more on some of the tooling we're talking about here. So we talk about Z-Detect or Z-Detect for anybody over in North America. We like to call it the Intelligent Security Alerting and Monitoring Tool. And when we advance a couple of slides in a moment, as I mentioned, you'll see this knowledge base, and that's what we call the intelligent part. It's all browser based. It has the ability to feed to the seams. We have the ability to consolidate all these LPARs into a single dashboard because it comes with its own browser based dashboard. What this means is, we can give you that insight from a mainframe perspective of what's going on, but obviously pushing the information out to your CM if needed. It's about real-time threat detection, and it's about doing this on the platform where the threats are occurring, rather than sending the data off to a QRadar or a Splunk and doing the analytics there. We're doing the analytics on the mainframe because we feel that's the most appropriate platform to do this. So it's all about using the mainframe to analyse what's happening on your mainframe at that moment in time. So if you look at the architecture here of the tool, the most important part, and the piece that I try to explain most, is that knowledge base. And as I said, that's where we've distilled all that we've learned over the last 25, 30 years of all the pen tests, all the audits, all the security consultancy we've done. We've distilled that into this knowledge base. So, if I was to pick on John for a moment, we have the ability to detect that John, as a systems programmer, has been up to no good. So we dynamically added his APF authorised library. What we have the ability to do is go and do some control checks against that to say, okay, has John done this properly? Does it meet a certain dataset naming standard? Is it protected by the ESM in a particular way? So if you use RACF, does it have a fully qualified dataset profile? Does it have a UAC of none? What does the access list look like? We have the ability then to turn around and say, well, I'm not too sure what John's doing, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap John's user ID on the shoulder here and I'm going to watch him now. And I then have the ability to say, well, look, John's APF authorised this library, but I've just seen him submit a batch job that's running a program out of the library that's just APF authorised, and we try to tie all these things together. What we're saying here is, if we think that John's nefarious activity is severe enough, we have the ability to call out to application audit and enable application audit for John's current 3270 session. So that's what we're doing. As I mentioned, it comes with its own internal web browser, and we actually have a box, suspicious activity, in there. Yeah, we can see what commands people have been issued. So this is just a pure mainframe view of the world. Okay, but using those events in that suspicious activity, we can tie those together. And as I said, if we feel John is being naughty, and he probably is, then we can do something about it. So that's kind of detecting the suspicious activity, the rogue insider. But then you've also got your privileged users, and where we're being driven today by the auditors and the risk folks in clients we work with is they're saying, we want you to take away all of the excessive access from our privileged users and only give them access to these sensitive data sets or privileged commands when they actually need it. And that's why we developed this solution, Breakglass. Okay, it's browser based, it's a fully SMF audited, everything's controlled by the ESM, as to who can do what and what can they do. Okay, so the idea is you build a set of Breakglass users, and they could be John's particular Breakglass user ID, or it could be an application or a functional Breakglass user ID. So you could have a Breakglass user ID for your ZOS systems programmers or your Kick systems programmers. But the idea is that they don't need to have the privileged users don't have this access all of the time. Okay, and we manage these Breakglass users with random passwords, revoked user IDs. Everything's audited to SMF. Sorry. We give you the ability to process these things out of certain hours. So we have this thing called manager mode. So there's a lot you can do with this. But again, what we're saying is here, if John, as the systems programmer, uses his Breakglass user ID, we have the ability to record every keystroke John uses when he's using that privileged user, and that actually will remain over John logging off and then logging back on. We can do all of this automatically because of the interface that we've got. Okay, there's an architecture slide here, but basically you have one Breakglass instance running in your monoplex or sysplex or per ESM. Very, very simple, very easy to use. And these are the kind of screen samples you get. So it's all done with the browser. It's all done via RACF, ACF2 or Top 6. Everything's controlled that way. Because where we want to get to is that if we've got a privileged user or we've detected suspicious activity, you have the ability, if you've got application audit installed, to call application audit from the RSM toolset and dynamically turn on full screen recording of what that user is doing. So you know every single keystroke they make. And of course you've got the ability to push all of this information out to your SIEM, alert it up to your SOC, so you can say, we think John's doing something wrong. We've actually turned on application audit. What do you want to do next? So that's where we are. So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to John so John can talk about application audit.
Thank you, Mark. So once RSM has initiated a recording through application audit to capture everything that the user in question is doing, and don't forget that this user, while you might be John's credentials, it could be someone that has acquired those credentials somehow, and his name really might be Mark. But here we have a list of all the recordings that are going on in the system, but we're really interested in what that one user is doing that RSM has issued an alert for. And so we can go over to application audit and view the activity for that one individual user. And in this case, he's on a 3270 screen. It looks like he's on his ISPF primary panel there. And he's entered an M and then hit enter to go to the next screen. And on that screen, he enters option 2 and presses enter, which takes him into Rack S. And from there, the user enters 7 and presses enter, which takes him down to the digital certificates, key rings, and such. And your imagination can go from here as to what that user might be doing. The point here is that we're capturing all of that user's activities, anything they're entering on the screens, any PF keys they're pressing or enter, and we're actually capturing the full screen so that you can go back and see exactly what that user was doing. And this information becomes important from determining, is it the real user? Is he doing what he's allowed to do? And if he's not, is it something that is grounds for termination or prosecution, right? In the case of an insider threat or from an outsider that has acquired the credentials, so somehow they got John's credentials and Mark is in here doing things with the system he shouldn't be doing, right? Then the decision can also be made to use a tool such as break glass in this case or Z-detect to then go and either terminate the user or you terminate the user yourself from the SOC. But the idea here is you want to capture exactly what the user is doing so that you can make a more educated determination on what action to take. Coming back to the browser user interface for application audit, we see that we have other recordings happening here. They might be recording various applications. They could be recording a range of users or individual users. That information can be pushed to a theme such as Splunk. And in this example, we have a dashboard from Splunk, and we're drilling down into looking at invalid transactions. And this is over a period of 24 hours, and we have a number of users with invalid transactions. And this is a good security example because most users know which transactions, say in CICS, they need to execute. And if they don't, it could be that they need some education on which programs to run, which transactions to execute. It could be someone that's in the system with someone else's credentials, and they're trying lots of different transaction IDs, right? Or if they're in TSO, maybe they're entering invalid commands, and they're racking up a high number of these invalid transaction errors or command not found errors. And that becomes an indication that there is or could be an issue, and what that issue is really depends on the user ID, and you have to drill down and look at exactly what that user was doing. And then you can determine, was it a real user that maybe just needed some education? Was it that real user that's playing around in the system trying to see what other transactions he might be able to run? Or was it someone from the outside that's trying to find transactions so that they can get into the applications and get to your data? So as I mentioned, we were looking at a Splunk application. The data that application audit collects can also be sent to other analytics engines and other themes such as QRadar or ArcSight. There are a number of these that are supported. The idea is that you want to get that data for the most part into a theme or into an analytics engine then, so that you can use the power of the analytics to really look at user behaviors and look at those user behavior patterns to determine what's really going on and work out what are abnormal behaviors, because that's where you're going to find those breaches and find those problems with access into your system.
And here's an interesting one. So what else can we do? Well, yeah, when you start looking at some of the tooling you've now got, yeah, we have quite a rich tool set here that says, well, we could get a little bit more on the front foot with mainframe security. So if we detect that we've got a suspicious user, yeah, do you actually want to take some measures to protect your system? So that could be something like, well, I'm actually going to cancel the TSO user from the system, or I'm going to cancel that particular batch job. And if I think it's particularly serious enough, could I actually revoke the user in RACF? Could I actually reset the user's password? Yeah. I can keep sending information to the CM, whether that be QRadar, Splunk, ArcSight, Alien Vault, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. But we've now got this tool set that says, well, we can go on the front foot and try and protect our mainframe. Yeah. It's a little bit, like the disabled wait state D0D, dog zero dog. Yeah, what does that actually mean? Well, that means you've filled up all your SMF buffers, yeah, and you don't want to lose data. Now, I don't think we'd ever get to the point of doing that to your mainframe, but we could actually take some quite draconian measures against a user. But you do have to be careful. It's that balance between service and security, because if John has dynamically APF authorised this library and he's doing it to fix a problem, and we come in and deauthorize it and cancel his user ID and revoke change his password, revoke his user ID, then John might have a few words for us. So you've got it's that balance between security and service. But at this point we've got a really, really rich set of tools now. So we've sent this information off up to Splunk. Somebody's done some analytics, and Splunk is saying we don't think this is very good, because actually we can see other activity on other servers or on other applications. And when you pull all that information together, you say, well, actually, I think I've got a major breach going on here. Have we noticed a spike in FTP traffic? Yeah. Has John been using the $in file transfer program, or there's suddenly a rush of Connect Direct jobs? If you add all these things together and start thinking about them, and you've got Detect installed here, and you've got we're recording everything that's going on with application audit. You can really be very, very creative with what you actually want to do. So what else can you do? Well, I think that really just comes down to your own imagination and how far do you want to go. And you might have to have a different thought process for different systems. Systems programming LPAR, fairly uncontrolled. We'll let the sysprogs declare UDI, they can do what they want. But development and pre-prod and QA, we might have one almost security posture, but when we get to production, we have a completely different way of looking at this thing. And you have all this flexibility when you've got these tool sets in place. Back to you, John.
Mark? So the theme around all of this is really focusing on the insider threat. And that insider can be a true insider, an employee, a contractor, someone who you know who that is, and they're using their own credentials for things. It could be someone from the outside that has come through the peripheral security protections, acquired somebody's credentials, and they're snooping around now on your mainframe, looking at things, doing things. And their behavior pattern is going to be different from what the normal user is. And that's really where this information all comes together, is looking at those user behavior patterns, using analytics, and coming back to focusing on that insider threat and really finding that insider threat or that breach sooner in the process. The sooner you find that breach, the sooner you control what's going on. The cost to the business is or can be much lower than the $3.8 million average globally on what it costs when there's a breach. So really, it's about narrowing the focus on the reporting and on what you have to report, and lowering the costs and protecting your systems. So if we look back at the benefits of multi-layered security, we're really actively monitoring for suspicious events. And when those events occur, or if an event occurs, we want to be able to send an alert immediately to your SOC, and really then also dynamically start capturing whatever it is that user is doing. And the reason for that capture going back earlier was you might need it for evidence in a court, in prosecution, or just to terminate the employee if it really was an employee doing something they really shouldn't have been doing, causing harm to your business. We're able to catch both security events and user behavior so that you can respond faster to what is going on and minimizing that impact. And really all of this reduces security and compliance risks and providing better intelligence in order to reduce those risks.
John, just to add one more thing to that, I think the days of us thinking that our mainframes are completely secure and nobody's interested in them are long gone. I know from bitter experience and seeing what's going on in the market, people are interested in our mainframes. They are seriously looking at them, and if we can do these things, what do you think some of the well-funded, well-motivated organisations can do? So you really do need to start thinking about mainframe security and how. One of the phrases that we often use is peeling the security onion. It's not about having 3 firewalls anymore and a couple of web servers and then they might eventually get to our mainframe. The common thinking today is that these bad actors are in our networks. They're actually doing stuff, and we need to know sooner rather than later if they are going after our mainframes. And that's where this multi-layered security idea comes from, and that's what it's all about. It's how do we get on the front foot and make certain that if something does happen, that we know about it and we know about it quickly, and we also know what has happened. That's the bit. That's where application audit comes in. It's that we can see definitively what John did between the hours of 2100 and 2200 Friday the 16th of March 2016. That's the kind of thing you need to be able to do, and you need to be able to evidence that, and that's what this type of technology allows.
Yeah, good points, Mark. There's no reason in today's world for anyone to not be thinking about mainstreaming the mainframe and providing the same protections and that you do for the rest of your environment, right? Let's not treat the mainframe any differently than the rest of the other platforms are treated within your organization.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We'll be getting to the Q&A momentarily, but I did want to just throw out a reminder that you will see a survey following the webinar. We'd appreciate your feedback. Complete the survey for your chance to win a $50 American Express gift card. And with that, let's go to the questions. First question. What is the overhead of recording all the user activity?
Yeah, good question. It's really almost I will say, with the proper tools you can measure it, but the overhead is almost immeasurable. We're watching the VTM 3270 data streams and recording it, and so we're just catching that information out of VTM, if you will. And so there's really no impact on VTM. There's no impact to the applications. The overhead, the actual overhead, is really low. If you want to get into more details about that, please feel free to reach out to us. But we have some extremely large customers using this technology, and their comments have always been along the lines of, "Wow, we hardly noticed that you're there. We really have to look for you."
Well, thanks, John, because that kind of leads into the next question, and I think you've also just answered that, the impact on MLC.
Yeah, that would go back to MLC because of our at least from an application audit standpoint, because our overhead is so low that we're really not impacting your MLC. Mark, do you want to touch on that from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Detect has been developed by people who've been writing mainframe software for many years. Yeah, we have again a very light footprint. Similar to John, yeah, people say to us, well, we hardly notice you there, but yeah, you can get Detect to do a lot of work, and that's where there's a balance, because security does cost, and that's why I mentioned having different controls or different behaviours or different rules in different environments. Yeah, am I worried about the systems programming environment? No, not at all. Okay, am I worried about dev, QA, pre-prod? Yes, but not as much as production, so I might only do half of the sampling and half of the monitoring. In production, where you've got your key frontline applications, then I think, yeah, you could, depending on what you do, you may see a slight bit of movement, but nothing that anybody has ever asked, yeah, or said to us, we have a problem with the product set. And I think, you know, there's a second part to this question that says, you know, how do you establish the criteria to identify suspicious activity? And really, that's what we say about distilling, yeah, all of that mainframe security knowledge from all the audits, all the pen tests and all the consulting we've done over the last 30 plus years. That's what we've distilled into the knowledge base. But we also give users of Detect the ability to say, yeah, if you see this pattern, then I want you to tell us about it. Okay, so we've got a very simple SQL and Rex interface into all the information we've got, and that kind of then rolls into the fifth question, which is there a learning curve for the product? Not really. If you're an experienced mainframe security person, you probably know a little bit of Rex, you probably know a little bit about SQL. If you don't, you know, these are very simple languages to use. So it's a really simple, lightweight, very easy to use tool set that we've tried to make. We've tried to make it as simple to use as possible.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. You were keeping up with those questions that were tying in just the way I was, so thank you. Next question. Where audit trail exists, can they be digitally signed in the same way that SMF can be? Is this something that is considered a requirement?
Shall I take the first part, John?
Sure, Mark, go ahead.
Okay, so everything that we capture and store, we store in an SQLite database on the mainframe. Today, that is not encrypted or digitally signed, but it is a requirement from one of our clients. Have asked that all of that data is encrypted. So it's on our roadmap and will probably be there within the next 6 months, because you can imagine some of that data is quite sensitive, and no, not at the moment, but very shortly it will be.
Excellent. What if we don't have a theme? Is there another way for us to report on this activity?
Go ahead,
John. You do this one. I'll let you do this one.
So from an application audit standpoint, if you don't have a theme, when application audit is capturing user activity, we are storing that into our own repository before it is actually sent to the theme. And so it's possible to create reports based on that captured information so that you can see the screen flow that the user was going through. But we're not performing the analytics on the mainframe in that repository because, you know, our idea is that there are plenty of experts in the security space that are already doing that type of analytics, whether it's in a Hadoop or an Elasticsearch or actually in a theme such as Splunk or QRadar or something. So without the analytics and without the that level of insight into bringing all the data together and seeing what's going on, you're really left with being able to look at the users individually as to what they were actually doing on the system, you know, from the data that we're capturing.
And I'd
Mark
also
might have a
add,
different perspective on that.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean a similar kind of thing. You know, all the information that we collect in Detect, yeah, it's all stored internally within Detect, and we provide a web browser so you can see, yeah, the activity. There's a whole bunch. I think there's about 10 different tabs on a web page you can go to. You can look at all of this information. But the bit that people tend to focus on is the alert and the suspicious activity windows in there, because that's the bit that you see scrolling round, and that's where we would see John misbehaving, or Mark might be misbehaving. You would see that. So that it all comes with its own inbuilt web browser.
So Mark, I guess this follows along this question that came in here just now. So is it the product that identifies what's suspicious, or is it the user who identifies what equals suspicious activity?
Okay, so I've read this question, and I think this is a really interesting one for me. This is an interesting question because, yeah, as I said, what we've done with the tool set is we have poured into that knowledge base all of that different sequence of events that could be suspicious. Now, do we give you the ability today to say, actually, yeah, Rick does this every Monday at 9 o'clock and it's not suspicious? No, we don't do that. We would actually flag that and say, yeah, this is suspicious activity because this sequence of events we think is a security exposure. Now, we have the concept of what we call whitelisting. We don't go down to that level at the moment, but I'm certain that that's something we could build into it. So the product doesn't learn, the fact that Mark does this every morning, because if he does it every morning at 9 o'clock, we wouldn't expect that to be suspicious activity. So if we are creating some noise because Mark or Rick is doing something that we consider wrong, then we would almost certainly give you the ability to to whitelist that and say, in fact, it's okay that Mark does this at 9 o'clock every morning, but we don't do that at this moment in time.
Gotcha.
But taking that a step further, or from a user, from a capturing the information perspective, if that user his activity is being recorded, and it doesn't have to be one of your privileged users, it could be an application user, and that information is going down to your SIEM, then that is really where a lot of that intelligence can come into play, right? Because now you're looking at user behaviors, and you're finding that a group of users, right, or that user even, that he normally does X, Y, and Z, and now he's doing something different. And your analytics engine or your SIEM can then flag that as a potential problem to go look at. But those patterns are, of user behavior are things that evolve over time. It's not a, capture data for one day and you know everything about the user. But that's really where the power of the analytics comes into play as well.
Good point. Okay, this one is kind of directed at each of you. Have either of you come across an SOC that has resources with the required skills to understand mainframe and any data being sent from them?
Can I take this one, please, John?
Go ahead, Mark. I'll come on after you in a minute.
Yeah. Dave, no, we haven't, and that's the point. Yeah, the point here is we know that the SOCs don't have the skills to understand this, and that's the whole idea of trying to automate a lot of this stuff, and that's why we've got this knowledge base. So when we send things to the SOC, it's put in the right kind of context. This is a severity one. This is what you need to do. Here are the risks. Yeah, these are the actions you need to take now, because we know that people monitoring the SOCs are usually looking after Windows systems or Linux systems or AIX systems. Yeah, are they really used to looking at mainframe systems? No, and that's one of the reasons we developed this tool set, is to make the data that gets there is in a form that they really can use and understand, because they don't have the skills, because it comes back to those three things that our clients are shouting at us about: security, skills and costs. So if we can do it automatically, cheaper, They don't need the skills, and we can give them a secure system. We've got something we can have a conversation with them about.
John, anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add that, you know, a lot of the SOCs, right, the security folks are, while they're not as familiar with the mainframe and how the mainframe works and the data as it's on the mainframe, as Mark was indicating, when that data is somewhat normalized and put into an analytics engine, and I can't stress that enough, that the analytics is really where you'll start finding those patterns and being able to understand what's going on with the application. So it's to some degree maybe understanding the application and what's going on with the application, or what's, you know, looking at it from the perspective of the data once it's down in your analytics engine and it's been more normalized and doesn't look like what it did on the mainframe. And that's where SOCs, or, you know, people in the security space can really start to work with that data a lot easier.
Okay. When do you plan or expect to provide whitelisting abilities?
So that's probably one for me, Janine. So I would say, Halden, probably within inside 12 months, but if somebody came to us with a requirement who was obviously interested in acquiring the technology, then, you know, I know the sales and commercial team at RSM very well. I would say that probably get put up the priority list quite quickly, as would any vendor. So I would say within inside 12 months, but sooner if needed. Yeah, it's certainly on the plan. It's just about prioritising the list of requirements.
Excellent.
Janine, there was a multi-part question earlier on that we answered part of and not the other part, and I'd like to just jump back to that for a second. One of the questions was about synchronizing the data, the activity recording across multiple platforms, and that really comes down to having the right timestamps, right, so that you're using the timestamps of when the action occurred to really to be able to synchronize that, and that synchronization probably happens in the analytics engine, right, in the SIEM where you're collecting the data from all the different platforms. Another part of that question had to do with establishing the criteria to identify suspicious activity, and how do you identify the specific user when they access IBM Z through a generic application user. Mark, do you want to talk about that one first for a minute?
Sorry, John, I'm trying to find the question.
It was number 4.
Oh, got it. Okay. How do you establish criteria? How do you access through a generic application user? So, you know, what we would see from a detect perspective are either messages on your ZOS syslog, messages in Unix syslog, or SMF events. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter how they're entering the system. Are they causing security violations? Have they triggered an automation rule? We would see all of that. Okay, so again, it comes back down to this knowledge base. We have a fair idea, I believe, of what looks like suspicious activity. Now, do we know what suspicious activity in your applications? Not at all. And that's something that we give you the ability to describe to detect. If you see event number 1 and event number 3 and message number 4, then we can then flag that as suspicious activity and start using the rest of the facilities in detect and the ability to call application audit.
Yeah, and so from an application audit perspective, we really don't identify the suspicious activity. But when you're capturing information with application audit, you're going to capture information based on a user ID if you know who the user is, or a range of IDs. And more than likely, you're going to be capturing information based on an Apple ID. So you're going to capture and be monitoring an entire application. And if the users are using a generic ID and you can't differentiate one user from another, you're also capturing terminal information, right, and other such environmental information. And so you can always track the suspicious behavior or the unwanted behavior or abnormal behavior back, if you can't track it back to that specific user, you can go back to the terminal ID and eventually go back to figuring out from there exactly which terminal that application was that user was on, right? And from there you can go back and figure out who the user was. So there are ways with all of that data to be able to figure out who the user really is.
Great, thanks. Unfortunately, we're running out of time for today. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, especially for your participation in the Q&A session. Some excellent questions, and it certainly adds to the value of the webinar. And I want to thank John and Mark for sharing their expertise with us today. Later this week, watch for a follow-up email from Compuware with the link to the recording of today's webinar. Don't forget to provide your feedback via the survey, and that concludes our webinar. Thanks again, and have a great day.